800 hours. Over the Strait of Hormuz, the morning sky was split by the sound of general quarters as the U.S. superfleet shifted into its highest level of combat readiness. What was unfolding in the narrow waters ahead had gone far beyond every intelligence forecast. The destroyer USS Delbert D. Black was locked onto the command center of Iran's $1.5 billion carrier-style vessel, the Shahed Bagheri, using its SPY-6 fire control radar. Beneath the surface, 20 IRGC fast attack craft moved into position, forming a tightening pincer around one of the world's most important energy corridors. Above them, F/A-18S from the aircraft carrier Abraham Lincoln thundered across the sky, guiding precision systems toward every Shahed drone launcher on deck. One wrong move could send shockwaves through the global economy. Tehran believed it had forced the American giant into a corner. But just as the pressure reached its breaking point, something unexpected appeared on the radar screens. Something so strange that it froze the command crews in place. What was really happening beneath the surface of the ocean? The standoff in the Strait of Hormuz had become a live test chamber for 21st century asymmetric warfare. To understand why Tehran would risk its regional reputation on a single high-stakes operation, you have to understand the unusual logic behind its maritime strategy. Unable to build a traditional aircraft carrier on the scale of a major naval power, the IRGC took a massive 250-meter commercial container hull and transformed it into something entirely different. Engineers added an angled flight deck, mounted rows of one-way drone launchers, and fitted the vessel with Zulfiqar missile racks. The result was the Shahed Bagheri, a floating stronghold worth an estimated $1.5 billion. On paper, it looked slow and vulnerable. But inside the tight waters of the strait, it became something far more dangerous. A massive decoy designed to disrupt the world's most vital energy route and force the U.S. Navy into a difficult choice. At 8:42 a.m., the standoff shifted into something almost unreal. As the USS Delbert D. Black held steady at 18 knots, the Shahed Bagheri began filling the air with intense electronic interference. At the same time, 20 IRGC fast attack craft spread into a crescent formation, attempting to push the American destroyer closer to Iran's jagged coastline. The crew of the Black stayed in complete MCON silence. No unnecessary transmissions, no emotional reactions, only the quiet hum of systems processing the chaos around them. Then the SPY-6 radar began peeling apart the Bagheri's electronic signature layer by layer. What it found did not match the picture Tehran wanted the Americans to see. The signals coming from the Iranian vessel were not coming from real drone control stations. They were being produced by powerful simulator generators mounted across the deck. The Shahed Bagheri was not the main threat. It was an electronic illusion, an expensive shell built to trick the American Aegis system into draining its missile inventory against the wrong target. The real move was hidden below the waves. While the world's attention remained fixed on the surface vessel, Tehran had quietly deployed a group of Ghadir-class mini-submarines and autonomous underwater systems beneath the hulls of passing civilian oil tankers. These silent platforms use the enormous engine noise of merchant ships as both physical cover and acoustic protection, receiving short, low-frequency command signals from controllers hidden along the coastal cliffs. The shadows beneath the surface were moving less than 2,000 yards from the Black's propellers. How does the U.S. Navy solve a needle-in-a-haystack problem when a 300,000-ton oil tanker is being used as moving cover? One wrong decision could trigger an environmental and economic disaster on a global scale. 8:50 a.m. The Hormuz chessboard had reached a dangerous imbalance. On the surface, the decoy vessel, Shahed Bagheri, continued to draw attention with aggressive electronic activity. But below the waves, Iranian Ghadir-class mini-submarines and unmanned underwater vehicles had quietly moved toward the USS Delbert D. Black. They were using a devastatingly simple tactic. The underwater platforms were hiding beneath the massive civilian supertanker Majestic Sapphire, a 300,000-ton giant whose engines created a wall of noise powerful enough to blur their own acoustic signatures. Trying to detect a mini-submarine in that environment was like trying to hear a single insect in the middle of a stadium concert. If the U.S. Navy reacted too quickly and struck the wrong object, the result could be a major ecological and economic crisis. Tehran's plan was clear. Use civilian traffic as cover, force hesitation, and create the perfect opening for its underwater assets. But the U.S. Navy had already prepared for this kind of scenario. From the deck of the aircraft carrier USS Abraham Lincoln, two MH-60R Seahawk anti-submarine helicopters lifted into the low fog. Known by many sailors as hunters of the deep, they moved toward the tanker formation and began deploying a dense field of AN/SSQ-5 3G passive sonar buoys around the surrounding waters. 9:05 a.m. The U.S. began what could only be described as underwater acoustic surgery. Instead of relying on basic tracking patterns, the Seahawk systems used advanced fusion processing to separate layer after layer of tanker noise. Thousands of overlapping sounds were filtered out until one specific pattern began to stand apart: the low-frequency rhythm of Ghadir-class propulsion. They did not need to see the target. They were listening to the seabed with supercomputer precision. Realizing that its acoustic cover was being decoded, the Shahed Bagheri made its next move. The vessel suddenly activated its fire control radar and directed it toward the Seahawk helicopters, trying to pressure them into pulling back. But the USS Delbert D. Black had a colder answer. Instead of answering with an obvious escalation, the Flight 3 destroyer used acoustic signature masking. By adjusting the flow around its propellers and activating simulated acoustic emitters, the Black created a false acoustic profile in the water. To Iranian sensors, it looked as if the American destroyer had shifted course and moved several miles away. But it had not. Iranian crews believed they were closing in on the Black. In reality, they were following a carefully built illusion, an acoustic ghost created by the U.S. Navy. And while the underwater assets were still tracking the false signal, the real USS Delbert D. Black quietly transmitted the confirmed coordinates to a Virginia-class submarine waiting deep below the surface. The Hunter had become the target, and did not even know it yet. Do you believe in the power of the U.S. Navy? If you do, comment 1 below. 9:15 a.m. Inside the command center of the Shahed Bagheri, Iran's floating fortress, the mood changed in an instant. Moments earlier, the commanders had been watching their screens with confidence, expecting to see the final approach path of their massive Shahed drone swarm. Instead, their displays erupted into a storm of flickering icons, system warnings, and broken telemetry. This was not a simple jamming effort. It was something far more precise, a digital disruption carried out through the invisible reach of the American global shield. High above the strait, two EA-18G Growlers from the USS Abraham Lincoln had already formed a secure digital link with the USS Delbert D. Black's SOWIP Block 3 system. Together, they were not just filling the airwaves with interference. They were studying the swarm's control links in real time, breaking down each signal layer by layer. Using machine-assisted signal processing, the U.S. Navy identified the exact timing intervals and data checks that kept hundreds of drones moving together as one coordinated system. The American electronic warfare team did not need to take over every drone. They only needed to disturb a small portion of the data flow. And that was enough. As corrupted packets reached the drone's mission computers, the entire formation began to lose coordination. Expensive autonomous systems drifted away from their assigned routes, misread their flight paths, and began crossing into each other's airspace. To the Iranian operators, it looked as if something was spreading through their network from the inside. At the same time, the U.S. fleet activated an advanced RF fingerprinting protocol. Every emergency command burst sent from the Iranian mothership in an attempt to regain control was intercepted, analyzed, and traced. With each transmission, Tehran was unknowingly revealing more of its hidden command structure. Emitters concealed inside coastal rock formations and underground facilities near Qasem Island began appearing as clear points on the American Aegis network. The Hunters had just handed the U.S. Navy a detailed map of their most sensitive command and control nodes. But the real masterstroke was psychological. The U.S. Navy had not actually taken control of the drones. It had simply shaped the information environment so that Iranian commanders believed it had. When the operators saw their drones begin turning back toward their own formation, panic took over the room. Their security protocols, heavily influenced by foreign military doctrine, triggered immediately. They believed the Americans had broken into the encryption chain and were about to redirect the entire drone swarm back toward the Shahed Bagheri itself. In that moment, the weapon they had launched to pressure the U.S. fleet became the source of their deepest fear. Facing a complete systems breakdown and the frightening possibility that their own equipment might turn against them, the Iranian leadership made a desperate decision. At 9:20 a.m., fearing that the Americans had gained full control of the swarm, Tehran's Central Command issued an emergency shutdown order. In a matter of seconds, thousands of Shahed drones, once presented as the pride of Iran's asymmetric arsenal, activated their internal termination systems and dropped into the turbulent waters of the Gulf like burning fragments of metal falling from the sky. The Dragon Swarm disappeared not because of an American strike, but because of the very commanders who had sent it forward. And for the IRGC, the embarrassment was only beginning. 9:30 a.m. The failure of the drone swarm pushed Tehran into a state of strategic desperation. For the commanders inside the IRGC network, losing such an expensive and symbolic asset demanded an immediate show of strength. They needed to restore their image in the region, and they reached for their final card: the hidden coastal launch complexes. Deep inside the jagged limestone cliffs of Keshem Island, heavy bunker doors began to open. Buried fire control systems connected to NOR anti-ship cruise platforms came online, sending concentrated pulses of electromagnetic energy toward the USS Delbert D. Black. This was now a high-stakes standoff in one of the narrowest and most sensitive waterways on Earth. The NOR system was built for low-altitude flight over the sea, designed to move just above the waves and make detection more difficult. At this range, even the threat of a large coordinated launch could shake global energy markets and pull the entire region toward a wider confrontation. One decision from inside those coastal bunkers would test the American Aegis shield to its absolute limit. But the U.S. Navy did not flinch. In a display of controlled pressure, the Delbert D. Black kept moving at a steady 18 knots. It did not turn away. It did not race for open water. It did not even adjust its heading. The American destroyer deliberately held its course, sending a silent message toward the cliffs. We know where you are, and we are not intimidated. That is the reality of modern naval power. The side with the stronger system does not need to panic. While Iranian crews watched their launch consoles, the American Overwatch made its next move. From the USS Abraham Lincoln, positioned beyond the horizon, EA-18G Growlers released a wave of MALDJ flying decoys. These were not ordinary targets. They were digital phantoms designed to imitate the radar signature of advanced aircraft and pull enemy sensors into confusion. Suddenly, Iranian radar screens filled with dozens of fast-moving contacts approaching the coastline from multiple directions. For Tehran's commanders, the picture became impossible to read. Was this the beginning of a real air operation, a deception, a warning, or all of it at once? Inside the bunkers, hesitation spread through the room. They had only seconds to decide what was real. Do they activate their remaining missile systems against what appears to be 50 incoming American aircraft, exposing the exact locations of their hidden underground launch sites to an immediate U.S. response? Or do they stand down and accept a crushing strategic defeat? This was no longer a battle of firepower. It was a battle of perception. The U.S. had already aimed its next move directly at the center of Iran's command network, while Tehran was still trying to figure out which targets on the screen were real. The IRGC believed they had cornered a giant, but now they understood the truth. The giant had been standing behind them the entire time. The standoff reached its breaking point. The hunters from the east were one decision away from learning that in the Strait of Hormuz, the most dangerous threats are not always the ones visible on a map. At 9:45 a.m., as Iranian commanders finally realized they were staring at a digital mirage, the deadlock ended in total strategic silence. Faced with the risk of exposing their entire underground missile network, Tehran chose preservation over escalation. The fire control radars went dark. Launch crews were ordered to stand down. The Shahed Bagheri, the $1.5 billion paper tiger, turned away and was escorted back toward Bandar Abbas under the constant watch of American surveillance assets. The U.S. Navy did not destroy the Shahed Bagheri, and that was the point. In the world of high-stakes intelligence, a floating target can be more valuable than a wreck on the seafloor. The vessel was no longer just a symbol of power. It had become a moving liability. Every time the IRGC starts its engines, powers up its sensors, or shifts its formation, the Pentagon can read the pattern before the next command is even spoken. The U.S. did not simply win the encounter. It turned the entire fleet into an open book. The Navy does not search for confrontation, but when the moment comes, it knows how to end one without losing control of the board. In the deep blue waters of the strait, one rule remained clear. Do not test the boat. What do you think of this acoustic harvest victory? Was the captain of the USS Delbert D. Black right to show restraint, or should the U.S. have sent a stronger message to the IRGC? Let us know in the comments by typing yes. Your support helps us continue bringing you these high-stakes strategic briefings. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to Navy Vector so you never miss the next mission. The sensors are active, the board is set. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you on the next deck. Go Navy!